Hello, Eric Williams here on Sahara Television. Today, in this segment, we'll take a look at criticism of the black press. For example, here in New York, in a newspaper called The Beacon, the headline screamed, "Black press attacked for efforts to strengthen its ties to Africa." At issue was a trip that was recently made at the beginning of January. It was a trip sponsored by, or at least the individuals who were connected to, the National Newspapers Publishers Association. They had taken an all-expense trip to Morocco. That trip came under fire by a columnist based in Washington, D.C. He's an African-American, and his name is Richard Prince. Now, Mr. Prince really came under really sharp criticism in The Beacon recently in an article with the byline of Floyd Alvin Galloway. And basically what Mr. Galloway was saying in his criticism of Mr. Prince was essentially, mind your own business, you write for predominantly white media, and that therefore the black press is crippled in ways you don't understand. So just to get a little bit of an insight on this, we decided to call up Richard Prince himself and tell his side of this rather compelling argument, as well, those of us in the black press are dealing with matters of storytelling and bringing the world to our doorsteps. Mr. Prince, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, now I got to start off with why the criticism? That is, why did you write the piece that essentially criticized members of the National Newspapers Publishers Association? Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, well, first, thanks for having me again. I didn't really criticize them myself. My column is a reporting column in which I do more reporting than opinionating. And so what I did was I just pointed out that going on an expense-paid trip by the government, by any government, is frowned upon by the leaders of the journalism profession, under the theory that it's a conflict of interest. It goes back outside of journalism to the old saying, "He who pays the piper calls the tune." In other words, if somebody's paying you away to do something, go someplace or do something, they expect something in return. And journalists' responsibility is not to whoever's paying the salary or the cost of some trip. It is to your public, your readers, and to the truth. And even if you're trying to be faithful to that, the appearance that you're doing otherwise is damaging.
Okay, let me ask you I certainly get the point right there. But then on the other hand, as in the case of the article written by Galloway and others across the black American press, coast to coast, they all point to the fact that, one, that they don't get the advertising dollars compared to their white counterparts, be it the traditional media of CBS, ABC, NBC, et cetera. And they point to the fact that something like advertisers in the USA last year spent over $75 billion on advertising through all media, and that the black and minority press, or media outlets in particular, only got a small sample of it, a shockingly small slice of that advertising dollars spent. And Galloway and others take the position that because of that fact, the black media in the United States and Canada as well is forced to go on these paid junkets to African countries or any country in order to tell the story to their readership or listeners. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that that's really irrelevant because it's not that the mainstream media are doing that great either, and they certainly don't have money to be sending people on junkets, and wouldn't. The way these things are done ethically is that third parties, you seek third-party funding for these, i.e. foundations, and I devoted a column on that on Monday on the site of the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education, which, by the way, is not white-owned, as was implied in that piece, and talked about how the National Conference of Editorial Writers has conducted these trips for many years, and how they've gone about which foundations they had contacted, and they say it's a lot of work. You've got to justify that you're actually using this, how you spent this money to educate the public and not just to have a good time. And so,
but of course, a good time is had too. Of course, is
of course, but that's incidental. They're giving you the money to perform a service to the public, not to have a good time.
Of course.
So you've got to demonstrate that you performed this service. So the money is given to an organization, not to individual newspapers or media outlets that depend on advertising dollars. The Association of Opinion Journalists, which is composed of editorial writers, doesn't have any advertising at all. So,
and that's the group that you're connected with, of course. Opinion writers.
I'm a member of that organization. Yeah.
Okay.
So how much advertising the black press gets has nothing to do with this.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I hear exactly what you're saying. I found myself in the same situation some years ago here in New York, working at a black media outlet. The then Inner City Broadcasting Corporation's two stations here in New York, WBLS FM and WLIB AM. And in this case, the trip was to the Gambia, ostensibly to promote the International Roots Homecoming Festival. That also received some criticism. But my question to you is, when writers such as Galloway criticize you and say that you are a puppet of the white media when it comes to covering black issues such as this going across the Atlantic Ocean, don't you feel that to a certain extent that's unfair?
Well, of course it's unfair. First of all, I don't work for the white media. And secondly, I find it rather disturbing that they would advocate different professional standards for blacks and whites in the same business. I can't imagine black doctors or black lawyers saying, well, we don't have the money to do what the white doctors or white lawyers do, so we're not going to follow the standards of the profession.
Okay, all right. So
why should that be the case here?
All right, so then given the fact that we are dealing with a global audience, people from all over the world are watching this, from countries as diverse as Vanuatu, Nigeria, of course, and here in the United States, there has to be a solution to this in terms of explaining a complicated world to viewers of networks such as this, or readers of newspapers or blogs and so forth. What, in your mind, would be the solution, if any?
Well, as I say, you raise the money to go, and as the Association of Opinion Journalists has done, they have raised money to go on trips themselves from the United Nations Foundation, from the MacArthur Foundation, from the German Marshall Fund, all these groups who exist to do good and to promote a better informed public. And they are third parties that don't have skin in the game. They're not looking for you to make them some government look good. Okay, all right then.
You know something, what we'll do is we'll leave this right here for right now, but of course we will have you back in the future, and we'll try to fix up the technical issues that we had today, certainly.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks for having me.
I'd like to share a story with you on this very topic. Back in 1988, when your correspondent was an employee in the news department of Pacifica Radio's WBAI-FM here in New York, I was offered an all-expense-paid trip to Panama. The year was 1988, and Panama was engulfed in a crisis. WBAI Pacifica Radio, like much of the black press itself, was also strapped for cash. And so therefore, receiving an all-expense-paid trip to a foreign country was rather enticing. And so I took the plunge. This trip was actually sponsored by a group, at least ostensibly, or so I was told, by a local group here in New York called the Panamanian Political Organization. Myself and other reporters from the New York metropolitan area took part in this trip. And upon arriving in Panama City, Panama, we discover, much to our shock, that this trip was paid for by none other than the most controversial leader in South America at the time, none other than the General Manuel Antonio Noriega. So much for free trips. I'm Eric Williams in New York for Sahara Television.